All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz, Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Wednesday, March 10th. So the indices pretty much, for the most part, green on the day, except for Nasdaq, which was down fractionally for the day, down about 30 basis points, and basically that bounce that we saw early on in the day was sold off a bit. So very volatile, I would say, for Nasdaq. That was one of the observations that I was making today, is that these things are moving. The overall indices are moving pretty quickly, and the Nasdaq and the Nasdaq 100, the Qs, they are going from up to down, up. So when I see that type of volatility in an index, it tells me that you try to slow down a little bit in terms of what I'm doing, when I'm trading. When I see something go from down 50 basis points to up 1%, then back down to red on the day, it tells me to slow down my trading, number one, and it tells me to take smaller positions as the volatility increases. Right? As volatility increases, you do not need the same position sizes. So we'll get into the indices, and today was the day that the Dow outperformed. I've been watching this relationship the last couple days, because I think there was a differential of 3.8% Monday and Tuesday between what the Dow was doing and what the Qs were doing. Again, not that I watch the Dow every day, but the Dow's really been kind of outperforming a bit, so that's why I've been watching it a bit closer. And small caps did fine today too. They were up 1.7%. So before we get into the charts, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice, recommendation. Video is for education purposes only. So let's talk about the S&P. And really, I thought, kind of coming into today, there was signals, or that there was levels for us to watch. And these are things that we detail every morning. I send Tribeca Trade Group members, important levels to watch in the S&P. We also talk about them in the pre-market session, but I thought this, we lined this up pretty well today. We knew that we had some resistance in front of us, right? So again, short-term resistance, right? So if you're trading, depending on what time frame you're trading, if you're a longer-term trader, or doesn't even have to be a longer-term trader, medium to long-term swing trader, you can kind of maybe ignore some of it. But if you're trading, making decisions intraday like I am, these are levels that I pay attention to. So we've talked, and we talked about this in yesterday's video too. So you can, even if you're not a member, I do go over these levels. But 390,450, right? We hit that, and what's particularly constructive here, which I don't mind, is that we're hitting this resistance and we're not really backing off too much. So I think it's still in the constructive area for the S&P 500, but it's got to break 3904, right? So you've got your level to watch, and if we break above that, that's a good thing. I'll tell you the other thing that's good is, we got above for a while. We could not get above this downtrend line. And, we came back a little bit at the end of the day and tested it. It was kind of a little bit of a grumpy day to see that, sell off right at the end of the day. But, it's good that we're moving in the right direction, right? And we're above now the 200 period moving average, and that's the one that's highlighted in dark. It's a little bit of a thicker line because it's more important, and we're also above the 5 and the 20 and the 50, in terms of these little trend lines on the 1 hour chart. So these are constructive things. We just have to pop out a value, and I think we can maybe be set for another like higher in the S&P. So really, much better looking. It doesn't mean that we're all clear. It means you still have to pay attention and trade savvy, right? And I'll talk about that and what trading savvy means in a second, in terms of what we're seeing this week. Qs, on the other hand, a little bit of a different picture, right? So we did get over this, again, the white line, 200 period moving average. We've struggled with this, so we're kind of right neck and neck with it, and it's a little bit too. It's impossible to really make a prediction here because we're sitting right at this trend line, which is this 200 period moving average, and this comes into play a lot. And then the other thing is we hit resistance and couldn't break through it. So let's talk a little bit about being Oh, let me go through IWM too, because there was some nice strength in IWM, and look at IWM is above value, so it made it through, right? Here's also, I have a little bit of a downtrend line drawn for this. We spent some time underneath this, but we hit this yesterday and got rejected a little bit, but we powered through. And this is kind of what we want to see when we break through a value area. We want to see a big, strong move like that, where it just slices through it, like hot knife through butter, basically, right? Which is what we did. And now we're doing a little bit of a flag here, so that's pretty constructive for the small caps, right? And this is what this looks like on the 1 hour. We switch over to the daily chart. We switch over to a daily chart, and we're pretty damn near close to breaking out. We're actually, so I do look at multiple time frames. A lot of times, for my trading style, I use the daily, and I use the daily chart, and I use the 1 hour chart, and then of course for a little bit longer term things, I do look at the weekly chart to see the overall relationship. But 227.85, right, is the level to watch for the small cap ETF. So again, we've got some defined levels to watch, and how I use these things again is if we're approaching resistance. Am I going to put on more trades, or am I going to be taking off trades as we get into resistance? I'm going to either be taking off some exposure and basically waiting, right? Waiting around the top of value until I get that confirmation that we're above, right? I think that what I saw some traders do today is kind of just get caught. They were adding some exposure at the wrong time, right? And I think with the Qs, and we're going to go over sectors and so forth, but I think with the Qs for now, until they really kind of come back and show some strength, more than 1 day of strength, right? 1 day is not a trend, as I've said now, I think in just about every video in the last 3 or 4 days. 1 day is not a trend, and you want to be selling some of the rips right now, right? So in something that where we're seeing rotation, and that we are, if you've been watching my videos. But those things that are bouncing and not taking back a trend, you want to be selling into those. I think what's going to be particularly painful is that I see people chasing moves in growth. Right now, you could chase a little bit of the moves in, the industrials, the materials. Again, not, you never want to chase too much, but, if you're going to, whenever I chase, it's for a smaller quantity, and we went over that in the trading room earlier. But, but right now, chasing in growth is going to be very painful. Because these names have bounced, but you could see many of them, either have seen overhead selling, because there's some longs that are trapped, and I think it's a combination of things. I think also that they're just not in demand, right? And we've talked about that too. I don't want to keep reiterating or talking about things that I've talked about, but we know that there is a shift going on right now, and it's multiple reasons that there's a shift. The country's reopening, right? I gave my example on Peloton the other day, that just people are not going to be wanting to. Peloton is not going to see the same growth as when the country was in lockdown. People are still going to buy Pelotons, but it's not going to be as much because there's folks like me. As the weather gets warm, even though I'm getting older, I still like to go for a run. I still like to go out and go get fresh air. And as the country reopens and there's restrictions are going to be less, I'm going to be doing more of that. Right? I'm not going to be inside on a bike. I'm going to be outside on a bike. So that's the kind of thing that you have to think about. And I try to give these a little analogies like this. And again, I think Peloton is a great company. They've got a great product. But right now is just not the time for it as the country reopens, right? And the weather gets a little bit warmer outside. I'm looking forward to going bike riding, running outside a little bit. It's been so cold out. So anyway, that's another story. Let me stay on. Let me stay on track here. So that's kind of the levels to watch. The S&P looks decent here. Small caps look the strongest, and right now Qs are lagging a bit, right? And again, that's just for today, but it's a little bit more of a rejection in here. All right. So also being savvy, right? One of the things that I took advantage of this morning is selling. When Most of last night's, the overnight session was pretty quiet, right? Futures weren't really doing too much until we had the CPI report that came out this morning at 8:30, and then all of a sudden things started to kind of move and bounce, and I took advantage of that. And some of the trades that I've put on recently, not a huge amount of them, but I got out of, I took a nice second target in Microsoft, and then I took the balance of the trade off. So why did I do that? Well, because it's not doing what I want it to do. Even though I'm in September calls, there's a difference that I like to talk about, right? And I think especially I'm seeing this a lot on Twitter and so on and so forth. Right? There's a difference between being patient and being stubborn. And I think right now there's more people that are being stubborn about growth stocks. So it may just take some time for them to work their way through and for there to be more demand in these areas. So while that's happening, there's other things that are working much better. Right? So here's Microsoft. You could see it got rejected where it needed to turn the corner. So it's not bad, in my opinion. It's still above, the 50-day moving average and so forth. But there's just better opportunities. So why waste my time in a trade that's not I made some money on it, but it doesn't have to be a killing. Right. The other area that's of concern to me is what's going on with the semiconductors too. The semiconductors I view as leading. I don't like what they're doing. So that is concerning to me. Right. SMH finished down 2% and the S&P's up. I don't like that relationship. I'd rather have the semiconductors be up 2%, leading. Rather than lagging like this. So we'll have to keep an eye on them. They moved back, they got rejected at the bottom of value, 50-day moving average, and they're below all the short-term moving averages. So I had an Nvidia trade today. What did I do with it? I got out of it right on the open, right? I took, I don't want to be super greedy here in any tech, semis, growth. If I see green, I'm taking it. So I got out of this trade for 650, paid 370. The most I can make on this is $10, but it's just not worth it trying to get the other 350 when I have something that's almost a double, almost not quite, but good enough for 1 or 2 day trade. I also tried Airbnb today, because I like this theme, but it's not doing what I want it to do, right? And I don't want to sit in a trade when there's other things that look better to me. Right, this thing got rejected. I thought maybe we could get to the top of value, which was 196. So I tried it. I took a target really quick because if you take a target for profits, it just helps you out so much better. Part of the trade is winning, and the rest of the trade you get stopped out in, but it really helps your cost basis in the overall trade. So let's talk about what's working. Things like the industrials, right? They closed right on the highs. So they are breaking out. When does this trend end? No idea. But right now it's pushing, and you got a lot of names acting very well. Boeing was a monster today, up 6%. Congrats if you got a hold of this one. Very nice. And also DraftKings. So it's not all tech that's dead, or growth. If you could find one, awesome. But I just think it's harder in this right now with these stocks, with the majority of them in this area, moving down or giving back early gains. But this one held its own, right? And if you look to see where DraftKings got, right to the top of value, 70.67, and that was the level that we talked about in the trading room today. So right there. So again, giving you a roadmap of if you're in a short-term trade, you know where your resistance is, right? You know where to get out of it. Right, because of our MarketWebs system here. All right, so I talked about that. I was on Bloomberg TV earlier talking about the material space, another group, right? And what I was telling people earlier too is, cover up the symbol if you have to, right? If you can't move on out of growth for the time being, cover up the symbol. Pretend it's snowflake or whatever it is called, snow. They're like, oh yeah, just cover up the symbol. right? Because like at the end of the day, for for me, like I want to have conviction in my ideas too, and it helps when you like the fundamental story. But if certain groups, and there's nothing wrong with, I think, playing, I talked about DuPont today on Bloomberg, but the other one that I'm in is in Axalta Coating. There's nothing wrong with being in a couple chemical companies, right? They just look very good. Dow out to new highs today. Uh, what's the other one that we've been talking about? LYB as well, almost out to new highs. Somebody mentioned to me Trox today. Trox had a nice green candle. All right, so getting familiar, and that's the perspective that I'm bringing to a lot of traders, is to say, hey, I know these growth stocks, they're frustrating, but look at some of these other areas that are doing very well. I'll tell you, look at the home builders today, right? All this, angst over interest rates. Home builders should be somewhat interest rate sensitive. Look at what they're doing. Lennar almost out to 52-week highs. Toll Brothers out to 52-week highs. So there's a lot of strength in this market. It just may not be in some areas. And I'll tell you, I'll give you. I try to kind of share some things that I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, like the Airbnb. That's a name that I like. But if it's not going to work, it's not going to work, right? So I'm not going to sit and be stubborn and get angry at the market. But I love growth stocks just as the next person. But you have to just move on a little bit. And if they're not going to work for the time being, they're not going to work. All right. So because I thought that we would see a bounce in growth, and I thought we would go right back. We would see strength again in some of these other groups. So I that was the way that I was leaning. And I actually added some things into that little bit of where that those groups that didn't have momentum to them yesterday, I thought that they would come back today. Look at the financials too. New highs in financials. Okay, so the other thing that I've been saying is if you're not comfortable with some of these groups, then you got to sit on your hands. All right. I was interested to see if Tesla could have a 2-day rally. It didn't finish that poorly, but look at it. Where did it get rejected? Bottom of value. Where did it get rejected on the 1-hour chart? Top of value. All right. So we set this up. We talked about this. We have our charts setups. And some of the things that. But I mentioned. I put a lot of charts. For members in here, and I said this morning. And I said, does it have more than a 1-day bounce? I said, keep an eye on 698.71. I said this at 8:30 in the morning. Right? Now we tried, but nope. Right? So what I would when I was watching this 1-hour bar develop, I said, hey, I would like to see a nice big green bar that gets you over the top of value, and and I almost took a trade. I was lining up, like a call spread or something like that, and I was waiting. I said, let me wait till the 1-hour bar closes, and I know that's a long time to wait, but it failed. Now it's not sitting that far back. It could get back over that. It just may take some time. And the way that I kind of distinguish things is if I'm going to be in something that's going to take more time, like my long-term account, I have what's called the Trend Portfolio, where I don't look at the positions every second, right? I may look at them once a day, and that gives me a little bit more patience. But in my trading account, I don't want to be in something that is not triggering, right? So, I think we saw this in a number of names today. I can give you more examples, but for some names, right around the open was the high of the day in these things, right? Apps is another one, right? Again, look at this thing. Try to turn the corner, and look where that stalled. Also, bottom of value, 78.63. So these 1-hour value areas they are so good for letting you know where there's that support and resistance. In this case, 78.63 was a really good resistance level. All right, so I'll cover a couple other my other trades, but I actually went long XLI. I added to it a little bit this morning. I started a trade. I've been watching these rails, right? So CSX didn't do anything crazy today, but I like the chart pattern. I think it looks pretty good. Home Depot's been coming back nicely, although that stalled right at the 200-day moving average. It did not close on the highs. STNG was a name that I traded a few months ago. Really nice move here too. Out of this consolidation. But the rails look good. Transportation looks strong. Industrials, materials, financials, home builders. Another name, we saw some calls pretty far out of the money calls, so I'm not 100% sure if they were bought. But I don't really have anything on energy, right? As I mentioned a couple minutes ago, that if I'm not that comfortable with it, I don't take it. But if you're looking for a trade in energy, the Schlumberger doesn't look bad, and you can define your risk very well here. What does that mean? Well, if I take a trade here at $29.95, where is it not going to work for me? If it gets back inside value below 28.80. All right, so that's how you could get out of a trade very quickly if it's not working. All right, so it's better to find something that is like this, where if you're wrong, you know exactly where to get out of it. Alcoa, all right, came out of this this flag today. All right, so this is one that I chased a little bit, and what did I say? I'm late on this one, so just trading a little bit to participate. All right, so if I'm going to chase something, it's going to be small. There's another trade that didn't work. Right, again, luckily, I got a little bit greedy with taking the second target, and I didn't get the second target. So that happens. But yeah, no reason to be in this at this point. And I sized this appropriately yesterday. I said this is a very volatile name. Has to be a smaller position to take something like that. And sure enough, like I sized it appropriately. So even though this thing went all the way down to where'd this thing finish for the day? Right, it's another area that can't get going. That's a bearish engulfing bar. Ugly. Trying to turn the corner. Started strong. Closed weak. Right, and that's another group that to me is still struggling. Bounced, right? But you're still way below the 50-day moving average, below value. This is biotech, by the way. And a number of outcomes could happen here. Right? We could, now that we've bounced, it could come back here. It could either make a lower low or it could make a higher low, which would be constructive, and maybe a W pattern. That would be fine. But we have to kind of wait and see for that. All right, guys, so that's it for today's video. Overall, again, I'll say, for me, a pretty constructive day. I was a big seller of anything tech on the open, and then took, anything else I tried in that space. I got out for, not any major losses, and the things that are working for me are, those areas that I've covered in this video. So. That's fine. There's still a lot of opportunities. There's another one I don't think I talked about, but Honeywell. This looks, we've talked about Honeywell, I think, a couple times over the last few weeks. Nice looking chart. RTX is working too. I'm still in RTX. It's a slow mover, but it's working. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.